Hi, this is Greg Baldwin. I'm here with Jane Nelson. Jane was our keynote speaker today at the Client Summit 2010 for VolunteerMatch. We brought together a bunch of our clients and we talked a little bit about CSR strategies, volunteering and the value chain, and a variety of other topics. And I've got a couple of quick questions for Jane that I wanted to ask her. You talked a little bit today about the power of volunteerism. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think it's one of the greatest untold stories of, particularly America as a nation. And if you actually look at the multiplier effect of millions of people every day, day in, day out, in their communities, through their companies, through the non-profit organizations in this country, who are giving the wonderful combination of time, sort of talent, and as well as their treasure. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I think we're increasingly beginning to appreciate the numbers dimension, the numbers multiplier, the numbers of people, the amount of money, and the amount of skills that is going into local communities and working with non-profit organizations. But I think that the power of volunteering goes beyond the numbers, as amazing as those are. I think there's very interesting research coming out, some work I know that you've done recently with United Healthcare on both the physical as well as the mental health benefits of volunteering and the impact of volunteering at sort of every age demographic on the health side of people. Obviously, a lot of research now coming out on the productivity benefits of volunteering to companies, and as we move into an era where there's going to be more and more global competition and workplace productivity is important, the idea that volunteering is a nice little thing to do on the side versus something that's not just about staff and employee morale and leadership development, but actually potentially helping to enhance corporate productivity is another sort of story that I think is part of the power of volunteering story. I think sort of looking forward, the two big trends on the horizon, which I think have enormous potential on the volunteering front, is obviously the boomer generation retiring, and the combination of the relative health, wealth, and education capabilities of this generation of over 70 million people, combined with what one could probably broadly call the Facebook generation, who are so networked and I think very aware and increasingly, I think you see it with students, I think you see it with young people even in schools, interested in volunteering and service. If you combine that with current employees in companies, retirees and future employees, the combination, the opportunity for companies to be more creative about how they bring those three stakeholder groups together around the volunteering ethos is enormous and I think very exciting.
And you talked a little bit as well about how volunteering is something unique to America, not being from the U.S. I think we'll take you to be an objective observer of some of the cultural elements. But you also talk a lot about how corporations are really changing their attitudes and their relationship with society. And you talked about some of the big trends that you think are changing the way corporations are operating when it comes to their CSR strategies. Can you tell us about some of those big trends?
Absolutely, and I think we are seeing these trends playing out across the world, not just here in the States. But I think probably the three big trends that I would outline is, first of all, an increasingly complex set of stakeholders who have, in almost every case you look at, increased expectations of companies. So whether it's employees, whether it's future employees, whether it's customers increasingly, I think we're even seeing it with investors. I think governments are requiring and demanding more of business because they're under so much pressure. Activist organizations, non-profit organizations. So I think the first big trend is changing social expectations of the private sector, particularly of big companies, and the different stakeholder groups that are so important to long-term survival and sustainability of companies becoming both more demanding, more complex and more sophisticated in what they're expecting of business, and the need to manage those stakeholder relationships, retain trust, retain sort of brand, equity and reputation in this increasingly demanding stakeholder context is the first big challenge I would see. I think the second sort of big trend we're seeing that is bringing social and environmental issues more to the heart of corporate strategy and the business agenda are the big sort of global game changer trends like climate change, like challenges in education in this country, let alone internationally, inequality, and again, in America as well as internationally, that these are becoming harder issues for business to say, well, we'll do a little bit of philanthropy, traditional philanthropy on the side, because these are beginning to affect the long-term productivity and sustainability, and it varies on an industry sector by sector basis, but they're sort of so-called what used to be soft issues are becoming hard issues, and climate change is the classic example, but I think there are other environmental indicators, so which means that companies are having to factor in these social and environmental issues much more mainstream into their corporate citizenship and their philanthropy activities, but those then are also becoming, I think, more aligned and mainstream with the leading companies with their overall corporate strategy. And then I think the third big trend we're seeing, which is both a positive and a challenging trend, is the emergence of the big emerging markets, and the so-called BRICS of Brazil, Russia, India, China, but many of the other emerging markets in the G20, which are increasingly competing with America, obviously, but also American companies going into those markets are dealing with a whole range of issues which aren't as big a challenge as they are here in the States, and having to develop global strategies for not only, again, one's corporate strategy, but for one's corporate citizenship and one's corporate responsibility strategies and volunteering strategies, is meaning that these issues are becoming much more sort of both challenging, but requiring greater senior executive buy-in and support than was traditionally the case. So I think it's those three things: a very changing and very dynamic stakeholder community and increasingly demanding stakeholder community, the need to deal with increasingly complex social environmental issues which have long-term relevance for the competitiveness and sustainability of business, and then thirdly, the fact that in a global operating environment, companies are having to not only develop their corporate strategy on a global basis, but also their corporate philanthropy